What if your grandfather's dying wish was crushed by a woman who treats HOA rules like holy scripture? What if one polite letter could summon cops to your family's legacy and threaten everything you built? And what if the real punchline was that she thought you'd stay quiet forever while she lined her pockets? Early morning light filtered through the vines like it always did, soft and golden. The kind of Virginia morning that makes you forget the world outside your fence even exists. I was out there with the hose, water beating on the Cabernet leaves, when the sirens sliced the piece apart. Not one cruiser. Two. Lights flashing like a bad disco. Tires spitting gravel on my dirt road. I stepped out, boots caked in red clay, hands still dirty from the morning pruning. And there she stood, Lydia Kensington, brand new HOA queen of Ridgecrest Estates. White sundress fluttering like she was auditioning for a country club commercial. Chanel knockoff shades perched on her nose. Red lipstick painted into that permanent, I already won smirk. She pointed one manicured finger straight at me like I was a stain on her perfect vision board. 30 days. Mr. Caldwell, she announced. Voice all sugar and steel. Clear this agricultural eyesore, or we'll see you in court. The community standards are very clear. I didn't answer. I just stared past her at the endless rows of grapevines my grandpa planted at 72 with hands that shook like autumn leaves. Land he bought with every penny from 40 years on the factory floor. His last words to me, whispered in that hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and regret. Don't let anyone take 1 inch. Ethan. Not one. Lydia had bought the oversized colonial next door 6 months earlier. Her little luxury condo development only made money if my vineyard disappeared. So she'd weaponized the HOA like a suburban Excalibur. Cops. Letters. The whole show. But she'd missed one tiny, delicious detail. This land had never been part of Ridgecrest Estates. Not one single day. When those deputies finally unrolled the county map on the hood of their cruiser, her face was going to drain faster than cheap box wine at a bad tasting. Let me take you back to how this circus started. Grandpa bought these 43 rocky acres outside Charlottesville in 2009 for what he called a stupid good price. The soil was stubborn red clay. The old barn leaned like it had given up on life. And the previous owners had used it for cattle that clearly hated their jobs. But Grandpa tasted Virginia wine once on a weekend trip and came home possessed. He planted the first 12 rows of Cabernet Franc that spring. Then a stubborn block of Viognier everyone swore wouldn't survive the elevation. It thrived. Grandpa took that personally, like the land itself was flipping off the skeptics. He passed in 2017. Dad held it for 2 years before handing me the keys in 2019, muttering that farming was a young man's game, and he was done. By 2021, Caldwell's Crest Vineyard had a tasting room that smelled of oak and possibility, a wine club with 300 members, and a dry rose that a DC blogger called shockingly drinkable for something that doesn't cost $40. We framed the article. It still hangs crooked above the bar like a middle finger to every wine snob in the state. Here's the geography lesson that matters more than you think. Our property sits on County Route 614, a solid quarter-mile outside the fancy brick entrance of Ridgecrest Estates. That planned community popped up in the early 2000s when some developer decided America needed more beige houses and soul-crushing covenants. Their HOA has rules about grass height, 3 inches max, measured with a ruler. I kid you not. Paint colors, only approved neutrals. Holiday wreath diameters. And apparently the spiritual purity of anything within 5 miles. We were never in it. Never. Our deed. Our tax map. Our zoning, agricultural operation on unincorporated land. Those 7 words would become the most beautiful sentence in the whole ridiculous saga. Enter Lydia Kensington. Moved in 2019. Elected to the board in 6 months. Crowned president in a year. In that time, she'd already forced a retired teacher to rip out her vegetable garden, eyesore. Find a widow for wind chimes that were audibly disruptive during quiet hours, and sent a cease and desist to a veteran whose American flag was 3 inches too wide. The woman had talent. The first time I heard her name was a Tuesday in late April. My vineyard manager, Boyd, A no-nonsense ex-army sergeant who could make a tractor confess, walked into the tasting room holding a letter like it had personally insulted his mother. "You got mail from some lady named Kensington," he growled. HOA letterhead. Gold embossed logo that screamed, "We take ourselves way too seriously." It informed me that Caldwell's crest was in violation of Community Standards Section 4.2, commercial noise and traffic disrupting residential quality of life. Demanded we cancel weekend events, close by 4 p.m., and submit a remediation plan within 30 days. Bottom had Lydia's direct line. Boyd looked at me. I looked at Boyd. "She thinks she runs us," he said. "She thinks a lot of things," I answered. I should have called the county planning office that afternoon. I didn't. I assumed good faith. Classic polite guy mistake. Next morning I stood among the dew-kissed vines, phone in hand, ready to be reasonable. She picked up on the second ring. "This is Lydia Kensington, Ridgecrest Estates HOA president." I introduced myself, explained the obvious misunderstanding about jurisdiction. There was one of those theatrical pauses you hear in bad community theater. "Mr. Caldwell," she cooed. "Our standards apply to any property impacting our residents' quality of life, including adjacent commercial operations." I stared at a grape cluster like it might back me up. "That's not how property law works." "Ma'am, our legal counsel disagrees." I asked for documentation. She said her assistant would follow up. The assistant never did. What followed instead 3 days later was a second letter, now Level 2 violation, threatening every legal remedy under the sun. I still wasn't worried. HOA letters are the adult version of a kid screaming, "I'm telling Mom." Scarier on paper than in reality. So I went back to work. We had our big spring release weekend coming, 90 guests. A smokehouse food truck. Bluegrass trio Boyd had bragged about since January. Gravel crunched. Hickory smoke curled. Rose flowed. Perfect afternoon. Until Lydia arrived. No ticket. No invitation. Just a clipboard. Phone recording like a weapon. And 2 bored minions trailing her like anxious poodles. Boyd met them at the gate. "Private event. Need a ticket. We're here on HOA business," Lydia announced loud enough for guests to hear. Boyd didn't blink. "You have no business here." She filmed everything. The parking lot. The food truck. The sign. Boyd's face. Then declared the whole operation in direct violation and subject to immediate remediation. One of our regulars, a retired civil engineer named Harlan, wandered over. "Who exactly are you?" "President of Ridgecrest Estates HOA. Harlan pointed down the road. "That's a quarter mile that way. This is private property." Lydia ignored him. Turned to me. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm formally notifying. You need to leave," I said quietly. First time I'd said it out loud. Her eyes widened like I'd slapped her with a wet vine. "Excuse me. You're trespassing. This is private property. Leave." She left. But she filmed the walk back to her Mercedes. Posted the footage that night in the Ridgecrest Facebook group with a caption calling us a noise and traffic hazard operating in defiance of community governance. 47 likes. The algorithm did the rest. I made mistake number 2. I posted a polite, factual reply explaining we weren't in their HOA comment section exploded. By Monday, Lydia had filed with county zoning, contacted our event insurer, and written the Virginia Department of Agriculture suggesting our exemption was fraudulent. She was playing chess. I was still playing checkers. Time to change games. I called an attorney, Cecilia Drummond, agricultural property rights specialist who kept a needlepoint in her office that read, "Easements are forever." She reviewed everything in 24 hours and confirmed what I already knew in my bones. Zero legal relationship to the HOA jurisdiction ended at their gate. None of this applied to us. But Cecilia warned me. She's not trying to win legally. She's trying to make you exhausted and broke. That's vexatious litigation, process as punishment. Document everything. She drafted a cease and desist. Sent it to Lydia and the HOA lawyer. Lydia's response? She organized a community meeting in their beige clubhouse and presented a dossier claiming we were tanking property values and attracting the wrong element. A quiet neighbor named Tilford slipped me the details later. "She implied your wine club members aren't the right sort," he said carefully. I started keeping a notebook. Dates. Times. Every call. Every lie. May turned to June. Vines grew chest high. Lydia escalated to the County Board of Supervisors. Showed up with a petition. PowerPoint. The works. I showed up with licenses. Noise logs under 65 dB. And a letter from the Farm Bureau citing Virginia's Right to Farm Act. Board took no action. Lydia looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Then she went after our vendors. Called the food truck guy. Suggested liability issues. He pulled out. That one stung. Cold anger settled in my chest, the useful kind. Boyd noticed. You're done waiting, he said one evening on the porch. Time to stop defending, I answered. Time to attack. Cecilia had been digging. Public records are a beautiful thing. 3 years earlier, the original developer sold leftover parcels to a holding company, Ridgecrest Land Partners, LLC. One silent partner, Lydia Kensington. And one of those parcels, Lot 47, sat directly across from my entrance. Their subdivision application assumed my Vineyard events would be gone. Traffic study literally built on my closure. She'd never disclosed the conflict. Not once. Fraud. Tortious interference. Motive on a silver platter. Cecilia smiled like a shark. We do this once. We do it right. And we do it in public. We spent 6 weeks getting the house in order. Lawsuit drafted. FOIA requests filed. Neighbors quietly asked questions. Our annual harvest preview party was coming. 150 guests. For food trucks, including our guy who agreed to return under legal protection. Bluegrass. Edison lights strung through the vines like stars. We made sure Lydia knew the date. We invited the county planning director as a Farm Bureau guest. We invited the local paper. We filed every notice perfectly. Lydia, sensing the wind shift, went nuclear. She called the sheriff's office the day before, claiming we'd serve alcohol to minors and exceed capacity. 2 deputies were dispatched to observe. She also tipped Channel 7 News, telling them it was a showdown. The morning of the party, I walked the vines at dawn exactly like Grandpa used to. Dew on the leaves. Heavy clusters ready. Lights waiting to glow. Everything in place. By 5 p.m., the place was alive, music, smoke, laughter. 147 happy people. Deputies parked politely at the entrance after reviewing our packet. Channel 7 camera rolling. And then Lydia arrived at 5:15. Sundress crisp. Attorney in tow. Clipboard raised like a battle flag. She marched in 20 feet before I stepped forward. Lydia, I said pleasantly, I'm glad you're here. There's something I'd like to show you. She started her usual speech. Cecilia appeared beside me holding papers. MS. Kensington. I'm serving you and Ridgecrest Land Partners, LLC with a civil complaint for tortious interference. Filed yesterday in circuit court. She handed the documents over. Additionally, I'd like County Planning Director Prather, who's right behind you, to see the conflict of interest documentation regarding Lot 47. The planning director's eyebrows shot up. The camera zoomed. Neighbors who'd come out of curiosity stopped talking. Lydia's face went through stages, red to white to green, like a traffic light having a breakdown. This is outrageous, she sputtered. The LLC filing is public record, Cecilia said sweetly. Your traffic study assumes my client's business is closed. Your HOA complaints were filed to manufacture that assumption. All time-stamped. All documented. Harlan stepped forward with his 11-page engineering rebuttal. Tilford and a dozen Ridgecrest residents watched in silence. One deputy chewed his brisket sandwich and looked bored. Ma'am, he told Lydia, we reviewed the maps. This property has no relationship to your HOA. Everything here is legal. Lydia turned to the camera, then to the deputies, then back to me. She had nothing left. Her attorney touched her arm. They left. The Channel 7 piece aired 3 days later, not the rogue Vineyard story she'd pitched, but a 4-minute takedown of an HOA president with a secret real estate stake. 6 weeks later, Lydia resigned as president. The lawsuit settled quietly in December. Lot 47 application withdrawn in January. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized the real win wasn't the money or the headlines. It was proving that patience isn't weakness. It's the trap they never see coming. We used part of the settlement to start something better. The Caldwell's Crest Agricultural Community Scholarship, two $2,500 awards every year for local kids studying farming. Viticulture. Anything that keeps land alive instead of turning it into more beige condos. Open to everyone. No exceptions. We also launched free monthly workshops in the tasting room. Soil science. Tractor repair. Small batch fermentation. Boyd teaches the tractor class, and he's terrifyingly good at it. The first scholarship winners were announced at our Fall Harvest Festival. Grandpa's Viognier was pouring. The same bluegrass band played. Tilford brought his wife's apple pie that disappeared in 8 minutes flat. I walked the quiet rows at dusk again. The way Grandpa used to. Clusters gone. Vines resting. Air smelling of wood smoke and coming frost. I thought about what he said when he planted those first rows. Land is an argument you make with time. A bet that what you build will outlast the people who try to stop you. He was right about the vines. He was right about that too. Lydia walked onto my property with 2 cop cars and 30 years of Grandpa's work in her crosshairs. She walked out holding a lawsuit she never saw coming. That's the real story. She came with lawyers. City Hall connections. Every procedural weapon money could buy. She had every advantage. And she still lost because she mistook my silence for surrender. That's how petty power works. It doesn't win with truth. It wins with exhaustion. It counts on you being too tired, too scared, too polite to fight back. I wasn't any of those things. I got a lawyer. I pulled records. I documented every dollar of damage. Then I waited until the perfect moment and dropped the trap. If you've ever had an HOA landlord, or a neighbor who uses rules as a club, you know that bone-deep exhaustion. They count on it. 3 things you can do right now. Pull your property survey. Know your boundaries cold. Start your paper trail the same day. Every call. Every letter. Every threat. And when they push, don't just push back. Build the trap. Drop your own HOA horror story in the comments. Some of them become the next video. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe. There are a lot more Lydia Kensingtons out there. But they're all counting on you giving up first. Don't. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's patient, documented, and delivered with a smile while the cameras roll. Lydia learned that the hard way. So can you. Never let them steal what your family bled for, 1 inch at a time.